Hello, and thank you for attending today's Atticus webinar, Parenting, Partnering, and Practicing. I'm Mike Wells. I'm the organizer behind the scenes here today. And before we begin, there are a few logistical issues that I'd like to go over with you. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of today's webinar. And so when you have a question, you can do a couple of indications to us. You can chat your function into the GoToWebinar dashboard. And if you'd like that question to remain anonymous, please indicate so in your message. You can also click the hand icon to indicate that you have a question or comment, and we can call on you and unmute you at the time so that you can be heard by the entire group. We also have available an exercise we're going to do during today's webinar. On your GoToWebinar dashboard, under the handouts section, there is a PDF called From Learning to Action. You can go ahead and download that now and print it out. And during the exercise, our presenters will ask you to fill out your ideas and actions that you've gained from today's session. Our first presenter is Cary Moss. Cary is from Sawyer & Sawyer. She is the managing partner, and I have known Cary for many years. She is vastly savvy, smart, intelligent. You are very lucky today to have Cary as one of your presenters. We also have Michele Fuller, the Michigan Law Center. Michele is nationally known for being a highly qualified special needs trust attorney. I've also had the pleasure of knowing Michele for many years. Really, guys, consider yourselves very lucky that you have these two attorneys leading today's presentation. Take lots of notes. Feel free to ask questions. If you've had a problem with your work-life balance, chances are Cary and Michele have been there, and they have found the way through it. Cary and Michele, I really want to thank you guys for leading today's presentation. You guys have been longtime Atticus clients, and we love that you have a passion for helping other attorneys. So I'm just going to give you guys the floor now and give you a chance to talk about why this is important to you.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, Michele. I don't know where you are currently, but it's good to see you. So I'm happy to be here today, and I appreciate Atticus asking both Michele and I to co-lead this because we are definitely unified in thinking about these issues as far as parenting, partnering, and practicing. And for me, this is it. This is the reason that you're looking at on the screen. I'm married and have two teenage boys, a senior in high school now and a freshman in high school. And as I look at this, what's so important for me is to think about the fact that not only did I want to be there for their activities and field trips and all of those kinds of things, but I wanted to be present, not just there and, present in the physical sense, but I want to be present in the mental sense. And I wanted to make sure that I had no regrets looking back, that I could, truly say that, this is my pride and joy, and I did everything I could to have a healthy balance, and I needed people to help me do that so I could give a good foundation for these boys and to really be part of it. I mean, that's the reason I had them. And so I'm committed, as I know Michele is, for similar reasons, to help others to try and strive each day to have some balance so that you can practice, but you can also have a really strong bond with your family and kids and so forth. So Mike, you want to advance to the next screen, and you'll see Michele has not only one-upped me, but she's two-upped me, I guess.
Well, I guess, but I have double the amount of kids and double the amount of marriages.
Perfect.
So it's two, holding it two. Yeah, I think it's the same thing, same values. And if you have those same values, that's partly why you're on this webinar today. And, I think that part of the competing thing is that, it's not just women anymore that have this struggle. I think that's one thing that we want to focus on, is that I know a lot of men that really resent not being present for their families, not being able to be the coach of their kids' little league or softball team or baseball team. It's just as important for parents to be engaged. And having gone through a divorce, meeting the love of my life who doesn't live in the same state, practicing, it's very complicated but exciting. And so, there's how to work with blended families. So we have similar issues. So if you confronted something like that, you're in good company, because not all of us are lucky enough to meet the love of their life. And Cary, you've been together over 20 years now, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes it doesn't work. And then sometimes the second thing. So everything's a juggle. Everything is, there's a couple of main concepts that we want to talk about today to help maintain that balance. And so everybody struggles with the parenting, the practicing, and partnering. So everyone has multiple roles that they fill, right, Cary? Where, you also practice with your spouse, which is unique, and I practice adjacent to my spouse. And so there's that sweet spot. I love, sometimes we can introduce math concepts that we all loved, depending on the area of practice that you come from, right? So there's that sweet spot in the middle where all these things converge. And, you're never going to achieve nirvana where everything is in equal balance. But I think that's where some things need more attention than others. The question is, are you taking care of yourself? What's your bandwidth for being able to be resilient? And so this is part of what this series will help teach you. And this is stuff that we've kind of learned along the way. Would you say that's true, Cary?
Yeah, and I do. I think the illustration of that juggle of keeping all of the balls in the air, right? So you've got these 3 balls that are all 3 incredibly important parts of your life. And I think for all of us, there is probably a moment that we feel that we're not doing anything very well. And I think that's what led me to Atticus 10 years or so ago, whenever that was. And it's a matter of, I'm juggling all of this, but I'm not being a great wife. I'm not being a great mom. And I'm not really being a great leader in my practice. I'm not being a good employer. I just felt so unsatisfied. And, I've told this story a gazillion times and, thinking when my kids were little, one day I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to get a cup of coffee and drive really slow so I could just be by myself for 25 minutes without anybody needing anything from me and feeling so torn. And, the whole time I was driving, I was dripping coffee down that white shirt. And all I could think about, I didn't know how I even got to the office other than thinking, is this my life? Is this how it's going to be for the next 30 or 40 years? There's got to be a different, better way. And really what it all boils down to is being intentional and figuring out how you can, as it shows on the screen, cultivate this harmony. I mean, we are parenting not only our kids, but Michele, I know you're in the same boat as I am. I'm parenting my parents. I've got 4 parents, all that decided to have a heart issue back in April at the same time. I mean, it's like, really, who's trying to race who to the hospital? And so we're struggling with that as that kind of sandwich generation, many of us. And then we've got the practice, which we all know, that's going to absolutely consume every ounce of our time if we let it. And that's really the key. And then partnering in whatever kind of relationship that you're in. I mean, typically it's under one roof where you have a committed relationship, whether you're married or live in, or you're co-parenting, Michele, as you've done. We've got all these 3 different things that we're trying to balance. And if you think about it from the standpoint of developing that skill and how to cultivate that harmony, so you're tending just like you would to a garden or a crop. I mean, you've got to completely learn and try different things, and what pesticide and, what water more, water less. And then that harmony where you have that balanced state. And that is a skill that nobody teaches us, that we have to just, learn and develop from people that have been through it and can give you pointers and tips along the way. So Mike, you want to advance to the next screen? So Michele, why don't you talk about the parenting?
Sure. So one of the things that we talk about in the parenting juggle is not just for women, but also there's a lot of single dads out there, or dads that really want to be present. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a same-sex relationship or a heterosexual relationship. It doesn't work, particularly if you don't live together and you have to co-parent in a somewhat harmonious way. That can be a really an important juggling act. And so one of the things that you can do is, and Mike, if you go back one to the Venn diagram really quickly to go back. So if you'll see that little white line, those are boundaries, right, that you see between the circles. And then you see the color changes in between. We live in that gray area where it's a blend of things. And so, but what you see are some boundaries. And I think that's where it starts, is you are in the center of these circles and you determine where those boundaries are. And that's where Cary was talking about being present, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, being present and available. And one of the techniques that we talk about in order to do that is dedicated parenting time with your kids, your loved ones. So Mike, if you'll go to the dinner table, there we go. This is kind of a lost time where, especially as kids get older and you've got kids going in all different directions, different activities, sporting events, it's not necessarily quantity of time, it's quality of time. And whether that is over the dinner table, whether if it's over texting, it's really a coordination and that balance, particularly if you are co-parenting with a parent that doesn't live under the same roof. Now, even if you're under the same roof, as Cary will attest, when you've got kids going in different practices, different games, who's covering what, you know, having a family meeting just like you would in your business, this comes first. There's a reason why this is first in the lineup as what we're talking about. You set boundaries as to what is going to happen in your family, who's covering what, and ask questions of your kids. Ask questions that aren't yes, no answers. How was school today? Fine. Right. So asking those questions, pulling some information out of them. And one of the things that we do at work and we're doing at home too is this kind of quick round table. It might sound a little cheesy, especially to your teenage, college age kids. They might roll their eyes a little bit, but sharing wins and what they're grateful for, what they appreciate about each other is a really grounding, and it really starts the catalyst for some very interesting conversations. And so you can just start with one, name one thing, right? So don't wait till Thanksgiving to be grateful for something. This is where you can really get to know your kids and what they're experiencing, particularly during COVID or other challenges that they may be facing. What are they grateful for? And so one of the other things is making sure that you're calendaring and setting boundaries around time that you just spend together, right? And that might be a family vacation. And this is a goal that you're shooting for, you know, especially like once per quarter, once every half year, but make it part of the first thing that you set a boundary around is that protective time. Next. Great. So let's talk about that agenda during the family meeting. Yes, you're going to run the meeting, right? It's a family meeting. So sometimes, you know, if you call a family meeting and it's only when there's an emergency, it immediately having a family meeting will trigger anxiety. Oh, I did something wrong. There's something horrible that's going awry. This is a way to change that conversation and that natural reaction where you just have a discussion with your children, with your spouse, with your loved ones about what's happening in the family. You're a very, you know, quick agenda could be, you know, what's going on, right? Celebrate your wins together. It's really important, especially with kids. Sometimes we're quick to criticize and we don't always look for ways to praise the kids or to praise your spouse, right? And so this is a way of letting them know that what you appreciate and what you notice about them. And it's a deliberate, conscious choice to do that. Setting your family goals. What do you hope to accomplish? And this is where you do that scheduling. Who's on what? What's on second? What's coming up so that your kids aren't telling you at 10 o'clock the night before there's a bake sale, right? Or there's a project and you have to go get poster board from, you know, the nearby Walmart at, you know, 11 o'clock at night for them. So this is a way to kind of get in front of that. Mike, next slide. And so some of the strategies too is like, you know, identifying issues before they become issues, particularly as kids get older, they want to stay up late, they fight, you know, they go to bed really late, so they're chronically tired, reviewing grades And again, looking for ways to find appreciation, especially if you're struggling with those teenage years, which, as you can tell, I've gone through quite a few of those with different genders, and they're all different. You know, and this is really important too, like allowing them an opportunity to participate in helping the family, and that's through chores. All right, allowing them some choices. What are you going to do this week and by when? It gives them some opportunity of choice where they feel a little in control, but it's also a way to hold them accountable. And it just builds good skills for being a good adult and running their own family. You know, what some ideas are do a quick sprint, a quick cleaning sprint. There might be areas of toleration, like you know, right when you come in, that dumping area where backpacks and shoes and dog collars and all that stuff just kind of accumulates. Everybody pulls together, 15 minutes, it's done, right? Or kitchen cleanup. So everybody can go relax and go do something, whether it's a game time or anything like that. And then I think the most important thing is takeaways, right? You might be interested and you'll get some interesting responses from kids, even your spouse, when there's that takeaway at the end. And so, Cary.
And before we move on to partnering, you can leave it at that screen, Mike, but I also think it's really important to drive home the point that kids at any age are very intuitive and can sense things going on. And I think, you know, the fact that we've got to make the parenting a priority, not because we just want to be part of their lives, but they're watching, they're learning from us. And they can tell when you are not engaged. And so as Michelle's kind of laid out some of these things to kind of give focus on them, you know, don't be fooled by the fact that you think they're just ignoring it. They really, really pay attention. And, you know, I think I first understood that when I decided to take my first true vacation with zero, you know, absolutely no contact with the office, and I was gone for 10 days, and it was a scary thing for me, but I did it. But I will never forget my 6 or 7-year-old saying to me on the way home, I liked that you didn't work all the time, Mommy. I mean, they are watching, they're seeing this, and so really being intentional about this time with them as far as laying out some of these things that Michele talked about is absolutely critical, because I promise you they are taking note, whether you think they are or they aren't. And that just drilled home the point for me that I have got to make them a priority, and I've got to be present, and I've got to be focused on these things first and foremost, and fit my practice into it after the fact. And so we'll talk about that. Anything else to add to that, Michele? Because I know you've had those aha moments.
No, I think that's a really good observation, because I think that as your, you know, kids, they're afraid of certainly of criticizing a parent, and they won't do that. But occasionally you'll get called out for being on your phone too much, and I'm certainly guilty of it, right? So making it a practice to, as you say, be the example. So when you're at the dinner table, don't allow phones on the table. And if you have a practicing spouse that's in a high pressure job, whether it's law or consulting or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It can be it can be a very tall ask. And so be the example that, as Cary pointed out, you know, how you want to conduct your lives, you want to be present. And it's really, especially if things aren't going well at home, it can be really easy to be a distract. So work can be a distraction. And so if you need help, there is help out there too. So you don't have to do this alone. These are just some steps where, you know, if there's some friction there, this is a good way to kind of get it out and get ahead of it as well. So Cary, those are just outstanding. And you had a 6-year-old that was like, Mommy, I liked that you didn't work.
They recognize it. They see it. When you think that they don't, they do. So they absolutely do. So Mike, let's talk about partnering. So as Michele talked to you, or kind of alluded to the fact, or brought up the fact that not only do I manage the firm, but my partner is my husband. And he's been with us since my oldest son was born. So that's when he joined, and he stayed. So, you know, that is a whole nother dynamic to this whole partnering discussion. But I think the key here is and this kind of illustrates it. You've got to be swimming in the right direction if you want to get anywhere anytime soon, right? I mean, you can be swimming as hard and fast as you can, but if you're not swimming in the same direction, you're really just, kind of defeating the whole purpose of working so hard, right? So that partnering, really the key critical component to that is communication. And so Mike, go ahead and advance to the next screen. And so that communication part, there's kind of several elements here that I wanted to talk about. First and foremost is you've got to set, and I know we had to in our relationship, you have to set boundaries and some rules because we do work together. It's really easy to go home and start talking about work stuff when we really should be focusing on each other or the kids and that life. And so, we've really done, I think, pretty well, not perfect because nobody's perfect, right? But I think we've done relatively well in saying, look, when we step outside the office door, that's it. And barring some kind of an emergency, we don't talk about it. We're not home cooking dinner talking about work stuff. We just leave it, and it's now the focus becomes on the family. And so it's important to create some of those rules and strategies and boundaries. In addition, I'm a morning person. I get up at 4:30 in the morning, right? I just wake up, and if I went to my husband even at 7:30 and said I wanted to communicate with him about some issue, problem, whatever it may be, first of all, his eyes would roll back in his head and he probably would chuck a pillow at me or something worse. And it's likewise if he tried to speak to me, about something that we need to talk about after 8 o'clock at night. I mean, forget it, I'm done. So learning when the appropriate time is and setting those boundaries and those rules is really important. The other thing that you see on the screen is setting goals. And it's not necessarily about whatever the goal is, that specific goal. It's about the discussion getting to that goal, right? It's about the communication. And so Atticus has always kind of walked us through an exercise called My Great Life, which is wonderful. I know Michelle's done it a handful of times. I've done it, a handful of times, but I have done that. And what's interesting is to have my husband, Tom, do that separately. And then what an interesting discussion. It's kind of like when I have performance reviews with employees. I mean, you learn a ton when you look at, okay, what's aligned and what's not aligned. And I didn't realize that was important to you. And this is important to me. And so again, for us trying to get to certain spots in our life and do certain things, yes, we're setting the goals, and yes, those are important to us, but it's really more about the facilitation of that discussion and that communication. So if you haven't done that, it's kind of a cool exercise to go through and worthwhile. Mike, go ahead and go on to the next screen. And so in order to have these communications, you got to have some dedicated time, right? And whether you want to call it a weekly meeting, we don't necessarily do that as far as a weekly meeting, so to speak, but we do carve out some time to talk about some certain things. We used to have definitely a weekly date night when the kids were little and they didn't have activities. So every Wednesday night we would go out to dinner, and we were religious about that for years. Times change as the kids grow up and you've got different phases in life. And so we have to figure out different opportunities for that. Scheduling a weekend getaway per quarter. Again, that's not always realistic. Certainly it's been hampered by COVID, and at some point, hopefully that can go away. But really just kind of trying to get something on the calendar, even if it's a staycation. I mean, I can send my kids over to friends' houses now, like for the weekend. So, and we can do things at the house and have that time. The one I love the most that's kind of on the screen is understanding their love language. And I'm sure most of you have probably read the book or at least heard about it, the 5 love languages, and there's spinoffs for kids and workplace appreciation and all of those things. But I love this because it so resonated with me when I figured out what mine is and what my husband is, and changing the way that we communicate with each other to make that communication more effective. And so for me, mine's physical touch, but secondly, it's acts of service. So if he would come home and just unload the dishwasher without me asking, wow, like through the roof, I'll listen to anything you have to say. And, it kind of reminds me, if you've ever seen that movie, The Breakup, with Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn, and they have this whole kitchen scene fight where they've had this, they've had people over and she made all this dinner and everybody's left and he sits down to play video games and she's, she wants to clean up because she doesn't want to go to bed with a dirty kitchen. And, she's like, aren't you going to help me? And it's like this whole back and forth. But the point is, she's like, I want you to want to do the dishes. I've said that to my husband. I want you to want to do that. And he's like, I'm never going to want to do the dishes, but if you ask me, I'm happy to do it, right? And he does. But it's, to me, it's like, just if you offer to do that, it just is night and day. And so for him, it's words of affirmation. So I know I need to say those things in a way so that we can communicate better. But that is, I love it because everybody's so different, and I just didn't realize, it's like, why don't you want to do the dishes, please? All right, go on to the next one. And so Michele, I'll let you take over on this practicing one.
Okay. And so I just love the scales of justice here. They're not really the scales of justice here. This really is scale of love, where you're trying to balance hopefully your love of your practice with the love of your life in general. And so I think that when it's completely out of balance, and it's out of balance for a long time, this is where you hear about lawyers who are incredibly dissatisfied with their life, with their practice. And that's just not the type of conversations that you hear when you come to an Atticus event or an Atticus seminar. Because what I love about Atticus is that it's not just about the dollars or how much you earn. It's really about living a great life and what that looks like to you. So I really appreciate that. And that's why my values really align with not just Atticus, but the people that also participate, like Cary. And so, Mike, let's go to the next thing. So this is one of the tools that we use at Atticus, and it's called the My Great Life Planner. So Cary talked about My Great Life. And I have to warn you, the first time you do it, it may be confrontational. I had a very hard time completing it the very first time I attempted it. And that's where I realized that some of the relationships in my life weren't working very well, and I didn't have a good vision of the future and what I wanted. This is where it's really great to have dedicated time to sit down with your spouse and make sure that you are swimming in the same direction, that you're growing together, not apart. But this is an incredible tool that kind of re-anchors where you're at right now, what you want to accomplish in the short term, and help just write it down. I know that we live in this electronic age where it's really easy to just put it in your phone, but there's something about the act of physically writing it down that connects it with your brain and your heart. And so I really love using this tool, and I have it for my whole team, and most of them have embraced it completely and now really can't do without it. And so again, we're talking about those boundaries, and the first thing that you need to plan and dedicate time for is your family and yourself. So there's going to be, if you decide to get the planner, there is a small section about how are you going to take care of yourself? It's the habit of building habits and the habit of building healthy habits. Like, how are you going to take care of yourself today? And that's one of the most important things that we all kind of let slide. And so, yes, absolutely use a paper planner. This is a fantastic tool. Mike, next. So you're going to talk about the oxygen mask?
I love this. Yeah, I really like this because, you know, we don't get to fly much anymore, but obviously everybody's flown before, and, you know, we're reminded this every time they go through the whole safety protocol. It's like, well, if there's a crisis, of course that sends me over the edge. Well, it's gonna, you know, these oxygen masks are gonna drop down, and make sure that you know, secure it over your nose and mouth first before you help anybody else, so that you can help other people. And so, unfortunately, in this world that we live in, as far as, you know, being practicing attorneys, we are so used to putting everybody else first and us last. I mean, we even put our animals first. I get my dog shots before I ever go get my annual checkup, right? So it's really important to take a step back, realize people are watching you. You know, you've got to walk the talk. But most importantly, we are solving complex issues daily. This has to be taken care of. The body has to be taken care of. You've got to give yourself a chance to relax, as it says, rejuvenate. You've got to get proper sleep, nutrition and exercise. I don't have to tell anybody that. I mean, I look at my kids, and you know, if they're cramping up in the middle of the first quarter on Friday night, that tells me they didn't drink water all week and they were eating Cheetos instead of, you know, bananas. And so, you know, and of course, any kind of religious affiliation and meditation is always great, but it's really important that if we are going to be, you know, good problem solvers and good employers and good parents and good friends and all of those things, we have to take care of ourselves first. Otherwise, we can't take care of anybody else. And so part of this overall concept and what we're talking to you about boils down to time management. We've got to be really good time managers in order for us to do all of these things. And so Michele, I'm going to have you talk about the next screen, which is the jelly beans, which is, a great description of time management issues.
Absolutely. It's a really good visual of what your day can look like. And if this is how you feel about your day, where your to-do list is so long that you could never hope to see the bottom of it, or it feels like it's just completely out of control. You're constantly running to the rescue. You're at 100% available to your staff at all times and your clients at all times. To just this morning, I saw a Facebook post from a colleague who said, we never sleep. We're available 24/7 for her law practice. And I just kind of went, oh boy, I don't want to ever work for her, right? I wouldn't want to. There's got to be a better way to manage your time. And so if this is what your life looks like, this course is for you. Some of these concepts are absolutely for you to create some space so that your day actually looks like this, where you have some room, to breathe, so that at the end of the day, you don't think you aren't completely exhausted and think, I didn't get one thing done that I needed to get done today. I'm sure you've had those days. I know I've had those days. But some of the things that cause us and can be a catalyst for change and making room, sometimes it takes a crisis, right? It has to be a compelling reason. There has to be accountability and coaching and guidance. This is why sometimes, this is the difference between just buying a gym membership and, oh, no change happens. Or you go once and you think, well, I'm still the size that I am. I guess this isn't working, right? We want dramatic change right away. That's not how it happens. It's just like going to the gym. You have to show up. You get the best results when you work with a trainer, a professional that can help you, and you have to actually do the work. And so it's about creating boundaries, creating space, and practicing. Practice, not just the practice of law, practice saying no, practice the communication, practice being present, because you're not going to get it right the first time. It takes commitment. And sometimes these commitments come as a result of a crisis, whether it's divorce, health, cash flow issues, can't maintain staffing. It could be any one of these things or all of these things. Just being unhappy with your practice, unhappy with your life. As you said, Cary, you're in the car wanting 5 minutes of peace, just sitting in your car with your coffee dripping down your hand going,
I knew I'd hit rock bottom at that point.
Yeah. So we're going to go through just a very brief exercise to kind of help anchor some of these concepts. So if you haven't done so, please download this form. And I think, Mike, if you can put it in the download in the handout file. Oh, it is in there. So in your control panel on the right-hand side, usually it's on the right on your screen, there's a little caret and it should be facing down. If you click on that, it says from learning to action. It's a downloadable PDF. So if you haven't done so, please do that now. And then you will see this pop up, right? And so this is from learning to action. It's a fillable PDF, but again, the best thing is if you can possibly print this out, do it in pencil, do it as many times as you need to. So we're just going to do a little sprint where here's some ideas about what concepts that you can at least get a catalyst for writing some of these things down. And it's really just top of mind awareness. And this might spring from areas of the greatest concern, areas where you are tolerating things that aren't working for you, aren't working for your firm or your family. And so what are the top ideas that you heard today about managing, or being present for your family, being present for your partner? And it could look like any one of these ideas. It could look like a date night, having some dedicated family time where you do something fun, or hopefully enroll the kids in cleaning up something, doing a 15-minute sprint. And again, it's putting in those boundaries where you might need to take a listserv diet, or a volunteer diet. Right? We talk about that a lot because it's just such a giant time suck. And there's ways to manage that. Take your top 3 ideas, the things that really spring to mind that you're like, oh, this could be something I really want to try, and put those into that top 3 ideas. And then take one small step that it would take, and that's where you put in the next actions. What's one small step that you can take toward making that happen? So, as Cary said, there's timing is everything. So it might be, setting a dedicated time to just you and your spouse talk about things that aren't related to work or the kids, where it's really just, again, what's a toleration? What isn't working for you? And that's where you need to take some action, or where you could take some action. And so this is a way to just really kind of anchor some of these ideas. And especially, I love the no reading email after 7 p.m. Right? Just enjoying that time with your family. That time should belong to them. And again, this is really sometimes the first step in noticing that you need to create some boundaries and starting to implement some of these ideas and trying some things out. And then at the end, what's your most important next action and your biggest takeaway? So we're just going to give you just a couple of minutes to work on this, and then we're going to have a mechanism to share just some ideas at the end.
I think it's important to note, Michelle, like we go through with our practice with Atticus, we go through these kinds of different sprints. It may not be called this particular one, but routinely we go through these kind of like real brief sprints where you can just jot things down, and there's something to be said with that, that brain connection and to writing things out, and just starting with small little things. I think that was really helpful to me early on, is to just take 1 or 2 things. You don't have to, and I always tell Steve Riley this, I don't buy everything you're saying, right? I used to always tell him that, like, I kind of came from this place of no, but really, it's really just taking like bite-size, chunks out of certain parts of your life and just focusing on that one little thing. And it's really helpful to kind of just jot it down on paper, and you can kind of go back and reflect on it. So if you don't have time to finish this today, give yourself a favor, do yourself a favor, and just spend, some quiet time, 15 minutes total, or 10 minutes, just to kind of fill this out and take one little thing and just focus on that. And I guarantee you start doing one little thing and then leads to another, and you really start to see a big impact in your life and your practice. And I think both Michelle and I have experienced that.
No question.
Hey, Cary and Michelle. So we've given the folks a couple of minutes to think about what their ideas are and what their next actions are. So if you'd like to, you can chat into your dashboard what your biggest takeaway was from today's presentation, what maybe one of your top ideas was, and we'll share those aloud. Or if you'd like to talk about this, raise your hand and we'll unmute you so that you can talk about it as well. But if you would, please type in what you feel is your next action or your biggest takeaway out of this, maybe a realization you had from today's presentation. And don't be shy. I see all your names there.
I think you can also do it in the questions panel. I'm not sure, and either panel would be fine. We'll be able to see it. I know it can feel scary not wanting to be the first one to share, but this is something that we do in Atticus, and I have to say that I learn just as much from my colleagues that are participating, and it feels really good if somebody shares something. I'm like, yeah, me too. Especially if they're struggling with something, you find that you're not alone, and that's very comforting.
All right, so we've got Jennifer, who said that kid input in the family meetings is an insight that she had, making sure that you communicate with the kids and asking them for their input. All right. Anybody else before we move on? There's no wrong answer.
No. There's no quiz.
Okay, well, listen, you've got the tool. It's there for you to download. You can work on this later. You can even email us later what you learned at grow@atticusadvantage.com. Or if you have a question for Cary or Michele, just send it to that email address, grow@atticusadvantage.com. I'll make sure they get it and that we can follow up with you on any questions you have. All right. So what's next for you? So today you guys have, attended today's webinar. This is the first in a series, and we're going to be sending invitations for the follow-ups in this series. And because you attended today's webinar, you're eligible for a discount on our upcoming Parenting, Partnering, and Practicing workshop that we're holding on December 1st from 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And the next topics are about the battle between domestic chores and parenting, and the power of the 15-minute sprint, and how to carve out time for a family vacation while your practice runs itself without you. We'll be emailing you, since you attended today, a coupon code when the registration is open for that workshop. And we hope that you come to the follow-up webinars as well. The workshop agenda itself, you're going to learn how to use the power and the impact of a 15-minute focus. You're going to learn about how to hire and manage a domestic assistant to help you with the issues at home. There's no reason why you should be paying somebody $300 an hour, if that's what you charge your clients, to clean your toilet. That's what you're doing when you clean your own toilet, or if you are doing your own laundry or pre-meal prep shopping. You could free up so much quality time for your family by hiring and managing a domestic assistant to help you and your partner at home out with all the chores. One of the things that Steve Riley, who wrote the book on hiring a domestic assistant, stresses is that the one thing you can't delegate away to that person is time with the kids. They're not the babysitter. They're there to help you free up more time to spend with your family and your loved ones. You'll also learn how to have the greatest vacation ever with your family, and how to carve out the time for that in your calendar, protect it, and to make sure that your practice is running smoothly without you while you're away. And how to use the family meeting agenda to build a stronger connection with your loved ones. So finally, the biggest benefit is you're going to be able to take a step forward in achieving some actual work-life balance, and instead of chasing that pipe dream of always having more free time someday. I had a question that just came in. Someone said they were late because they were picking up their daughter from school. Thank you for being a good parent. This webinar was recorded today, and we'll be putting it up on our website within the next 48 hours. So you'll be able to watch that as well. And I'll make sure that you get a follow-up message with that link. All right.
Mike, I just want to tell you, I'm so excited to talk about the next workshop with domestic assistant. I've had my Heather for about 3.5, almost 4 years now, and I cannot imagine life without her. She is my domestic goddess, and she is my secret sauce to domestic happiness. And so I'm very happy to talk about that. I'm thrilled, and so please don't miss. That is a don't miss.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up. Steve Riley, like I said, who wrote the book that we have in our bookstore on hiring a domestic assistant, he coaches many female attorneys. And when this concept is first explained to them, there is a feeling of guilt, like, well, but I'm supposed to be super mom. I'm supposed to take care of everything, because society puts that pressure on them. Did you feel any of that before you hired somebody, Michele?
Oh, absolutely. And, we talked about boundaries and making sure that you're taking care of yourself. I think that is one of the things that I had to give myself permission to kind of not accept that, not to take up that guilt. And it's not just from other people. Sometimes it's from your kids, because I remember distinctly, my teenage daughter said to me, well, if Heather's going to do all the shopping and cleaning and laundry, what are you going to do? Isn't that what a mom does? I'm like, oh, no, it is not. And so it was a lesson really in all of us about roles and what is the role of a parent and being more present. And it was a lovely thing, but it was a bit of a transition. And so I think preparing for that, knowing that you're going to face that, a little bit of criticism, and not caring because they're not in your house. it does really free you up both mentally and physically to take better care of yourself and your family.
Great point. Thank you, Michele. And thank you both for leading today's discussion and for the next 2 webinars in this series. I'm excited to be working with you guys.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Michele.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for participating today.
Everybody have a great afternoon.